Sup, guys? I don't know what that was. StreamYard, there's some StreamYard ghosts here, man. They're throwing the Tower Gang intro on Better Off Dead. I was like, yeah, maybe I'll leave it. It'll be hilarious. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't really want to get this channel nuked. So I'm like, yeah, whatever. Anyway, all right. Yesterday, winning day, but it was a 2-2 day, and it was only a small winning day because of the outright moneyline cash with Kennesaw State in the first game. So they pretty much, I believe they covered wire to wire, and they won the game outright against Liberty. Got close. Liberty didn't really need the game, so that was a good call by me, if I must say so myself. And then the next two games that came up right after that didn't happen. Illinois State never could get margin. I think they won and didn't cover. It wasn't really close either. And then Murray State teased me and tried to get back in that after they were getting blown out in that game, and they made a huge second half comeback to cut it to. They definitely cut it to 3. I don't know if it got even closer than that, but I was like, oh, maybe they're going to carry this momentum and actually do it, but that did not happen. So Murray State wound up losing, and then we finished the day with Kansas State with the win and cover. So take that market read on that one. I told you the situation was good for Kansas State. They got it done. They covered. I'll move on to today. I have basically the ugliest plays you could possibly imagine today. One in each sport: college basketball, hockey, and NBA. And if you could think of what the ugliest play is in each one, that's what I'm going to be on for the most part. Maybe in college basketball, it's not quite that bad, but college basketball, first game up on ESPN is Wake Forest and Duke. I mean, do we really need to talk about this? Duke is like a 20-point favorite, something like that. Wake played them pretty tough at Wake, so that might just give Duke a little bit more focus in this game because they know they didn't play that well at Wake, and Wake gave them kind of a run in that game, especially in the second half. So, yeah, Duke is going to win this game. I mean, am I going to try to play this game? No. But Wake Forest also has a little bit of extra motivation, perhaps, in this game because they have basically fallen out, man. Like, if they don't win this game, they're, like, not going to make the tournament. Even if they win this game, they might need help. But that's got to be some extra motivation on Wake. So maybe you'll see Wake still come within this number because it is a huge number, and Duke also likes to play slow. So if they do that at home, it might be a little bit more difficult for them to cover a number this big. Up from 20.5 to 21, though. 80% of tickets, 94% of the cash coming in on Duke. I'm not going to touch it. Again, like I said, I mean, this is not a game I want to get involved in, but I figured I would point it out with its bubble implications there for Wake Forest, although they look like they're really, really in trouble here. In the Atlantic Sun, that conference continues. It's still the only conference tournament that is underway. As of tonight, it'll still be the only one. Although I think the Ohio Valley actually is going to finish first. I think the A-Sun has like a few days off before they actually play their final. But last night we had a couple of games. Austin P won last night in a pretty easy win, actually. Wrong call by me over who did they? I don't even remember who they beat. Who did they beat? One of the other teams in this conference. Oh yeah, North Florida. And the game wasn't as much of a blowout as that looks. I will tell you that. I mean, you could see this right here. I mean, it was North Florida was winning more than half of the game. They were winning into the second half, so I was correct about that. And then North Florida, I don't know what they did here, man. They completely fell off and only scored 11 points in the final 15 minutes of the game, including not scoring at all in the final, 6 minutes. I don't know what this was. Andrew, what's up, man? Thank you. Yeah, that's true. Sometimes I do, but it also gets really hot in here. I do have heat on right now, even though it's kind of cold outside. It's almost getting to spring. It's going to get a little bit warmer again. It was a little bit warmer over the weekend, too. But yeah, North Florida, they played better than this final score would indicate in this game. They just completely fell off at the end. So Austin P maybe looks a little bit better than they were. And if you look at Austin P's games against North Alabama, that's who they're playing tonight, the 2 seed North Alabama. Now, sometimes in these conference tournaments, I like to look at the team that already played in one of those opening rounds of the tournament against the team that hasn't played yet, because the team that already played, they get a little bit of momentum. They get that pressure out of the way. You know what I mean? The pressure that you get from that, having that first tournament game, you get that out of the way. You get that win. You move on. So there'll be a little bit less pressure here, but I don't really know that I love the Austin P side here because, again, I think they look better than they are last night. I mean, for some of the season, I think they've actually underperformed, but last night I think they overperformed. Now we get North Alabama. North Alabama has beaten Austin Peay twice this year, both home and away, but they didn't beat them by that much. Actually, at home, North Alabama only beat them by 4 points as a 12.5-point favorite. But I think that might give us some extra value on North Alabama here, man, because North Alabama knows that the last time Austin Peay came into this place, they actually took them into overtime, even though it was a double-digit spread. So North Alabama may have focus for that reason. They were winning most of this game, and then they, I think, maybe got complacent, took their foot off the gas, even though their lead was, well, it was 10 with 5 minutes left. So I think maybe they, 5.5, maybe they took their foot off the gas. North Alabama had a bad shooting game here, 37.7% from the field. That wasn't good. They lost a turnover battle at home, which is pretty unlikely to happen again, I would say. Austin Peay, only 8 turnovers in that game. That's pretty low. Probably a little bit of an outlier there. North Alabama absolutely demolished them on the boards by a 21 rebound advantage in this game. So this game, maybe a little bit of a misleading result there. And then North Alabama did get their road revenge sort of after that, even though they did win that game. You know, I tell you a lot of times, if that first meeting in the season, you have a huge home favorite, and they almost lose the game, they tend to be focused more in the second game against that same team on the road. That is what we got here, is they beat Austin Peay at Austin Peay in the second game by 10 as 5.5-point favorites. So I think probably there was a little bit of value on that number too, because I think that number got shifted a little bit because of the other results. Austin Peay had a really bad shooting performance in this one, and like I said, kind of an outlier in that first game with the turnovers there, as they had way more in this one, although it was at home. But I think this game was a little bit more indicative of what we're going to see in this one. North Alabama, so it is a little bit strange, I guess, that North Alabama is laying more points than the win margin in either of these games. They're laying like 11.5 tonight. They only won these games by 10 and 4 in overtime, but I think it would be North Alabama in this game where you leave the game alone, man. I mean, I think they're the significantly better team here. Let me see. North Alabama up from 11.5 to 11.5 with juice. I think they win this game rather easily. I mean, that would be my guess in this one, as they had that first game that was close, and now they've actually shaved a couple of points off the number, and it's like, is there any real reason for that? Because we had North Alabama being 12.5, 13 that first time they played at home, and now we're looking at 11.5. So I think there actually may be a little bit of value in laying the points with North Alabama, but I would hesitate a little just because Austin Peay does have that game under the belt and has a little bit of momentum. And North Alabama and Lipscomb in this tournament are they form these like bubbles where those teams that played last night in the opening round played at the site of the team that they're playing tonight, whereas these other games in the tournament and kind of these other like middle seed games, these are actually at the home site of the higher seed. So this tournament being played at a lot of different venues. Queens is at Florida Gulf Coast. This game is at Florida Gulf Coast. It's at Fort Myers. So Florida Gulf Coast is hosting this one. This is, I believe, the 6 against the 3 in this tournament. Queens, as I've been telling you, I think they're overrated, man. I mean, they've been kind of overrated for a bunch of the season because they reeled off a bunch of wins kind of in the middle of the season here, and then they sort of kind of fell down to earth as the season went on. They're not really as good as they look. They, I believe, split the season series with Florida Gulf Coast. They lost at this place at Florida Gulf Coast, and they beat them at home, I believe. I don't even know where that game was. Was it earlier in the season? I don't even know. I'm pretty sure that was the case. Yeah, there it was. They won by 9 at home, lost on the road at Florida Gulf Coast. So not a whole lot to see there. But I would probably lean to Florida Gulf Coast here, man. I don't know if I'm going to dig into the box scores here and make this. Well, maybe I will. I mean, this is a long video, man. But you look at these teams. These teams play each other all the time. Queens actually shot really, really poorly in that game, though. So that's a little bit of an outlier in the game at Florida Gulf Coast, so maybe it wasn't quite as much of a blowout as it looks like it was. Florida Gulf Coast was laying 5.5 in that one, and they did cover, even though really, really terrible shooting percentages from Queens in that one. In the first game, I think Queens had really high shooting percentages. Yeah, they shot more than what you would think, although both teams shot pretty high from three-point range. The Queens was over 50% from the floor as well. Queens lost the turnover battle in that game, even though it was at home. I forget what they did in the turnover battle on the road, but all of those things being said, I actually think Florida Gulf Coast might be a little bit under the radar here. And if they're 5.5 at home in that first game, and now they're 4.5 in this one, I think that is a little bit of a maybe you're getting a little bit of value, I should say, on Florida Gulf Coast in that one as well. Although things have changed. You can't just leave these teams static. But Florida Gulf Coast, when they were on the road at Queens, where is that game? I just wanted to look and see what the line was there. It looks like it says Cuck. QUC. Florida Gulf Coast is actually a 3.5-point favorite at Queens in the first game. And then the line really shifted to being only Florida Gulf Coast, like 5.5 at home. And now we're at a point where they're 4.5 at home. I think there's probably value on the Florida Gulf Coast side, man. I think they're a little bit under the radar maybe at this point, even though they still have that name behind them, Dunk City, although we're over a decade removed from that at this point. Eastern Kentucky is at Jacksonville. This is another game in the same conference. Eastern Kentucky, I believe, also split the home and home again. No, they lost both, excuse me. They lost at home and on the road to Jacksonville. But they just lost to Jacksonville. They were just in this venue really not that long ago, like within the last week or so. And then all they did was go to North Florida. So not a whole lot of travel here. They're probably staying in Florida. Now they're going right back to that the scene of the crime where they played Jacksonville pretty close in this other game, but lost. Jacksonville was a 2.5-point favorite in this one. I believe that's about where the line is again here. This is a close game, man. There's not a whole lot to look at other than the fact that Eastern Kentucky actually shot quite poorly in this game, more poorly than even Jacksonville did. Both teams didn't shoot well, but Eastern Kentucky might see them bounce back a little bit from that because they really didn't shoot well. And then when they played their game at home, they were the favorite, as both these teams are pretty close. And Eastern Kentucky did have the lead almost the entirety of the second half and blew it and wound up losing the game in the end. So I think maybe there's a little bit of value with Eastern Kentucky here, man. And Jacksonville shot 47.1% from three in that one. Eastern Kentucky only 35.6% from the floor. So not that they're a great shooting team, but they had some fairly low percentages that maybe look like a little bit of outliers. Maybe we're going to get some progression back to a mean here. This is the 4-5 matchup, so it is supposed to be close typically. But I think I would lean to taking the points with Eastern Kentucky, man, even though Jacksonville won both of those matchups. Those were not like dominant Jacksonville wins, man. Like, oh, this team just has a huge matchup edge over the other. I don't think that's the case in this matchup here. I would lean to taking the points with Eastern Kentucky in this one. It is tough to beat the same team 3 times in a row, as everybody always says. But, however, it's a lot easier to do it when you've already won the first 2, and all you have to do is win one more game. But still, the team that's lost twice does have the advantage of they get to, like, try to adjust things. So it's kind of that, like, zigzag aspect of that. So Jacksonville is sitting at 2.5. Like I said, I would lean to Eastern Kentucky there. Let's keep going here. What do we got? I'll give you my play next, which is in one of the worst conferences there is, the MEAC. And I'm going to take Howard plus 9.5. There is a method to my madness in this one. This is my only play in college basketball here in a game that nobody's going to pay attention to. South Carolina State's down from 10 to 9.5, and I know South Carolina State is definitely the better team. Howard is really, really bad defensively. KenPom's luck index numbers don't look very good for them either, but they at least have a comparable offense to South Carolina State, so they may be able to try to hang within this number just by scoring. But this is more about the situational setup of this. South Carolina State just beat Norfolk State, man. That's a huge win. And then after this, they have NC Central, who even though they're down a little bit this year, they are a team that kind of carries some name weight in this conference. And that is going to be South Carolina's final home game, and it's revenge as they lost at North Carolina Central. So North Carolina Central and Norfolk were the 2 teams that beat them most recently. Those are the 2 most recent losses. They just got revenge over Norfolk, and they have their revenge against NC Central in their final home game on senior night up in 3 days. And Howard, they already went on the road and beat Howard. Where's that game? I'm looking for How. Yeah, and not only did they beat them, they embarrassed them by 23 points. So this is, I believe this to be a sandwich spot. It's a revenge sandwich spot. It's a road revenge spot for Howard. Pretty big revenge if you lose that badly, even though Howard is certainly the worst of these 2 teams as well. I like all of that, man. I think it's sandwich plus road revenge coming into play here. If you look at what happened in this game, Howard, they were in this game. They were not only in this game, they were winning this game for almost the entire first half. So this final score was quite misleading as Howard just completely fell apart in the second half, man. They scored very few points in the second half. They were at a point where they were down 58-56, 11 minutes left, and they only scored 10 points for the rest of the game. They went on a stretch where they didn't score for, 5 minutes of game time or something here near the end, or I guess it was more like 3 minutes, but still. They completely drifted off. They didn't shoot that well in the game. They had a ridiculously high amount of turnovers with 29. Even though they're going to be on the road here, I don't know that we're going to see that again. 29 is absurd. That's one of the most high turnover totals you're going to see. And I know this is not a good team, but they have an efficient offense at least, so I don't think you're going to see that high a turnover rate from them in this one. And South Carolina State shot well in that game, 52.5% from the field, 42.1% from three. So South Carolina State, maybe a little bit of an outlier there. And like I said, Howard, if you look at that final score, you'd think they just got annihilated in that game, but they were winning for more than half of the game almost. So they really just completely fell apart in the second half. So I like Howard in this game, man. I think the situation sets up well. I don't think that the final score in that first game alone really tells you the tale. Give me Howard plus the points in that one. That will be my only play of the day in college basketball. Okay. Then we got Central Arkansas and Lipscomb, and as I mentioned with the other game, this is in that A-Sun tournament as well. Central Arkansas, I should have mentioned last night, by the way. I didn't even realize this when I was looking at that game, and I had the right lean. I leaned to Central Arkansas on this one. Central Arkansas had the extra advantage in that game of they were staying at this venue or in the area of this venue in Nashville because they finished the regular season playing at Lipscomb. Then they know they wind up, we're going to have to play at Lipscomb again here to start the tournament. So they just stayed in Nashville for a couple of days. So they had an added advantage there where they just played in that same venue. So they were used to playing in the venue because they just did it. They didn't have to travel. That was somewhat of an edge for Central Arkansas in this game, man, and they won. It was a close finish. It was a fun game to watch at the end, man, even though, there were a bunch of turnovers at the end. I mean, these teams aren't that good, but it was a close game, good finish in the game, a pretty tight game at the end. Central Arkansas has this one guy, I think Turner. He's kind of a slow, rambling big dude, but he put up a lot of stats in that game, man. He had 37 points and 11 rebounds in that game last night or something. I think his name is Turner. Really, really good performance from him. And then I guess this other guy, Ev Bagaru, is that how you pronounce his name? I don't know. He had 23 in another game. That wasn't last night. Turner, I believe, was the guy last night who had a huge performance last night for Central Arkansas. I don't know these players at all, but it was just kind of fun watching that. But now Central Arkansas has that game under their belt. So does that give them a little bit of an advantage coming into this game? Yeah, it might. And it's a little bit of quick revenge because Central Arkansas did just lose to Lipscomb here. And Lipscomb was a 20.5-point favorite in that game, though. Lipscomb didn't cover. They won by 18. They won the whole game. I think it was the final home game. And yeah, it was senior day, but I think Lipscomb, they just knew they had the game in the bag, probably took their foot off the gas a little bit. I don't think this score was really that misleading. Central Arkansas, they shot fairly badly from three-point range. The stats, I don't know, kind of indicate just a win for Lipscomb, let's say, at the very least. But in this game, I don't know, man, because it's quick revenge. Central Arkansas got that game out of the way last night to kind of get some momentum going. I might look to take the points with them in this game, even though they did barely cover in that last one. It may be a similar thing for Lipscomb, where they kind of just, I don't know, they just think they're going to win this game easily and just kind of take their foot off the gas a little bit. I don't expect Lipscomb to lose, obviously. They're a huge favorite, but they're actually plus 19.5. That was never the line. I think it was 19.5. It's still 19.5. So the odds makers have actually shaved 1 point off of this line from the prior game. Does that mean there's value? No, I don't know. Probably not. I mean, 20.5 down to 19.5. That's not a huge difference in those lines. I think maybe the line moves to take into account the Central Arkansas situation and the fact that they do have momentum coming into this game, and that is a thing. Lipscomb still has momentum too. I mean, they just beat Central Arkansas here not that long ago, but Central Arkansas would be the team that has the adjustments to make, and they already got a game out of their belt in this tournament. So I would probably lean to Central Arkansas. I'm not playing any of these games of this tournament. I just don't see any strong enough situations here. But if this wasn't like a game where it was a total mismatch between the two teams, I might be looking to a team like Central Arkansas who's in a similar situation. I would have a slight lean to taking the points with them, but there's no way I'm doing that. Nichols and Lamar, when I first looked at this in the Southland, Lamar, they just took McNeese to the limit, man. McNeese was an 8.5-point road favorite at Lamar, and this one, Lamar has been a decent team in this conference over the past couple of years. Lamar had the lead for most of the first half in this game. McNeese completely swung it into a big double-digit lead in the second half. Then I think McNeese, they just packed it in, man. They were like, we've won this game. They had a 10-point lead with 4 minutes left, and then all of a sudden, not so fast, Lamar got all the way back into the game and tied it. And now Lamar's coming off of that. They almost beat McNeese, and they still fell short. So that has me looking at, I want to fade Lamar here. Excuse me, because they just came off of that near upset of the team that's dominated this conference the last couple of years. Huge game for them. But then I look at this, and the problem is, this is their senior night against Nichols. They did already beat Nichols on the road, so it is a road revenge spot for Nichols. They went in and beat them by 4 on the road. So that's another thing that lines up on Nichols. So if this was middle of the season, Lamar's coming off that game against McNeese where they almost pulled off the huge upset, and it's a road revenge spot for Nichols. Yeah, I would be on Nichols, but the problem is this is the final home game for Lamar. It's senior night, and the other problem is these teams are playing for seeding in this conference, man. These teams, they know they're both going to be either 2, 3, or 4 pretty much because I think Southeast Louisiana might be able to leapfrog one or both of them if they win and one of these teams loses. Well, one of these teams is going to lose. So I think that may be the case. So this may be the difference between the 2 and the 4 seed potentially here. So I think it is a motivating factor here that both of these teams are at least playing for that seeding, and I think it does matter. I don't remember how this tournament is set up, but I think maybe it does matter a little bit. You got to figure out how much of the seeding even matters in some of these tournaments, man, because sometimes you get like an extra bye, sometimes you don't, whatever the case is. But I think it still will be a big game, so I don't think Lamar is going to just not show up in that game. So that's the issue that I have there. I would still slightly lean to Nichols for all those other reasons, because I think Lamar might not be able to keep up that amount of effort, multiple games in a row like that, after that huge effort in the prior game. But they're up from 1.5 to 2 with juice. I don't think they're going to overlook the game, so I'll stay away. Kansas is at Houston. We know Kansas, man, they just lost at home to Texas Tech in a game where Kansas was an unranked home favorite in that one. This Kansas team, they're just falling apart, man. But Houston, is this a road revenge spot for Kansas? Let me see. I think it might be. Yeah, Houston went on the road, and they did beat Kansas by 6 at Allen Fieldhouse. Houston's just kind of rolling right now, but this is Houston's final home game, so it's senior night for Houston. So that's kind of a big deal for them. It's always pretty big when you have Kansas coming into your place, although Kansas is a little bit down here. It is a road revenge spot. Kansas is coming off a bigger game, though, so they're playing 2 tough games in a row against Texas Tech and Houston, and they had some momentum coming into that game against Texas Tech. And that game could be like kind of a heartbreaker, kind of, where Kansas, it's like, we're getting back to what we know. Like, we lost these games just because they were weird, like road venues, whatever. But now, I don't know, maybe that's not the case. If you lose at home to Texas Tech, even though Texas Tech is good, and I know they beat Houston at Houston as well, but still, I don't know, man. That could be a tough one to bounce back from for Kansas. They got these 2 tough games in a row. Sure, they're going to try to show up. I don't expect Houston to lose this game, obviously, but as far as the spread is concerned, I might still lean to Kansas. Houston down from 10 to 9.5 here. 56% of tickets on Houston, 63% of the cash coming in on Kansas. The public doesn't really want anything to do with Kansas at this point, man. And why would you? But Houston, as we know, they play really slow. They play good defense, even though they do have efficient offense this year. They're one of the best teams in the country, like almost all around. But they play slow enough that it's difficult to lay points with Houston. So I'm going to stay away from the game, but it's a big ESPN game at 9 p.m. Yeah, I mean, that's what's going on there. It could be a close game, man. We'll see. It is road revenge again for Kansas as well there. And Kansas has just been almost a Jekyll and Hyde. Like, sometimes they do look like one of those top teams, and sometimes they look like one of the worst teams in the conference. So who knows? And then we do have a Big Ten game with UCLA and Northwestern at 9 p.m. on Fox Sports 1. UCLA, I think this is kind of a weird spot for them, man, even though they did just go to Purdue and lose on Friday. I think I was on Purdue in that game because Purdue, I thought they needed a bounce back badly with 4 straight losses. UCLA having to play these unfamiliar venues in the middle of the country here. This is another unfamiliar venue to them, going to Northwestern. And they're going to finish their season against rival USC, even though USC is down this year. That's a big game. That's senior day for UCLA. So I don't know that this is the greatest spot for UCLA here, playing these 2 games in a row at unfamiliar venues. UCLA has the way better looking record here. And Northwestern, sitting at this ugly record, Northwestern, they know they're probably not going to win this game at Maryland. So I think they're going to be focused on this one. This is actually senior night for Northwestern. We know they're without Barnheiser, their best player, but they've started to turn it on a little bit. They won 3 games in a row. Granted, one of them was Minnesota and one of them was Iowa. They beat Ohio State in a blowout on the road. Minnesota on the road, still not really an easy thing to do, especially when you're down your best player. So Northwestern, with a little bit of momentum coming into this, it's senior night for them, and Northwestern might have a little bit of an added motivator here because the bottom 3 teams in this conference don't make the Big Ten tournament, and Northwestern is not out of the woods yet, let's say. I mean, right now it's USC, Penn State, and Washington. I really don't think Penn State is one of the bottom 3 teams in this conference, man, so it's sad to see. I really think Iowa kind of deserves to be down there. They're just completely falling apart, and maybe they will wind up there, but Northwestern, they would definitely like to get this win to stay out of the Big Ten basement. They don't want to miss the tournament entirely, so I think there are some extra motivating factors for Northwestern here as well. UCLA up from 1.5 to 3.5 here. 50% of tickets on them, but 75% of the cash coming in on Northwestern. I lean to the Northwestern side, like I said, and it looks way too ugly to do it. Like, if you're a public bettor, you come in and you see UCLA, like a very named team like that with a pretty good record, up against this Northwestern team with a really ugly-looking record, and you're only laying 3.5. Looks like a really cheap price. Why wouldn't you want to lay those points with UCLA? Northwestern, I believe, what does their pace look like? Let me see here. As I open up a new tab here, which is not what I wanted, a new window. Northwestern, both of these teams do play really slow as well, so that's also kind of good for taking the points as an underdog. That kind of is conducive to that. Northwestern, very unlucky, by the way, in KenPom's rankings. 345th, so he's telling you they're a lot better than they look. They're pretty good defensively. According to KenPom, top 50. They're actually 47th overall, which isn't that bad. Only 20 ranking spots lower than UCLA. Lower than UCLA. And you got 2 teams that are better defensively than offensively. 2 slow-paced teams. Does have the making of a home team potentially covering in a low-scoring game here. Total down from 133.5 to 132.5, so the total's pretty low. It is also low in that Kansas-Houston game, by the way, so an under might be worth a look in that game, too, because both of those teams do play pretty good defense. As I mentioned, Houston obviously does, but Kansas also does. So that could be an under type of game as well there. And then we do have a bunch of Big Sky games. They're all just kind of finishing up their final. They're all playing their final regular season game, I believe, in the Big Sky there. And I think all of those games do have some seeding implications as far as the tournament. So there aren't really any teams that are just totally unmotivated, I don't think, in that conference there. So we'll see what happens in that conference. Let's move on to hockey, NHL. I do have one play in the NHL. Not a lot of compelling matchups here, but I am going to play on the Buffalo Sabres, minus 110. I'll talk about this game at Montreal. This is a zigzag spot, man. This is a home and home. Montreal just went into Buffalo and beat them. And Montreal, I believe, hasn't even lost since coming out of the All-Star break. They've won every game. They went into the All-Star break on a massive skid, playing horrible hockey, losing, 8 of their last 9 games or something. Came out of it, and they've won 4 games in a row, though granted 3 of them were not really against the greatest teams. One of them was against Carolina, which was a big win. But other than that, they're not really beating up on these elite teams here. They just beat Buffalo at Buffalo. Now they come home to play Buffalo again, and right after this, they turn around and they play Edmonton on the road to start a road trip. Big road trip there. That's a big game against Edmonton. They might overlook this Buffalo team they just beat. One thing that I guess gives me a little bit of pause is that Dobes played in that previous game. He's the young, up-and-coming goaltender for Montreal there. He played pretty well. I mean, he's done decently for them. So Montembeault is probably going to be back in net here for Montreal in this one. He is their better goalie. So you are going to get the better goalie from Montreal here, but he might be a little bit maybe he's going to be a little bit rusty with a little bit of extra rest coming into this game, too. And then Buffalo, I don't even care who their goalie is because their goalies just aren't really that good. Luukkonen, I think, is their best goalie. I don't even know if it's going to be him in this game or not. They've been using Reimer instead of Levi recently. I don't know if Levi's hurt or if he just wasn't very good, or Levy. I don't know how you pronounce his name. Hopefully, it will be Luukkonen here, but I don't even know that it matters, man, because when you have a situation like this, man, and it's a home and home. You just lost at home to this team. Now you go on the road. It's a zigzag type of spot. It's quick road revenge. You tend to be the extra motivated team here, and you have the adjustments to make, man. When you just lost to this team, you're the team that has the adjustments to make. If everything went right for that team in that first game, they don't have anything to adjust, man. And in this game, it was a little bit closer than it looked in that first game, but also if you look at these teams' records, Montreal's not even getting home ice in this game. So the odds makers are telling you Montreal is actually not even the better team in this matchup, despite having the better record. So you look at that and think, well, that's just strange. But that is what the odds makers are telling you. It does not look like these, based on their records, you would not want to come in and play Buffalo as almost a road favorite in this game. So kind of a deceiving line in this one, which I kind of tend to look for things like that as well. And in that first game, there was an empty netter in this game. So this game was closer than the final looks. Buffalo just got ravaged with penalty minutes in this game, and 24 penalty minutes to only 10 for Montreal. So that was part of the reason why they lost this game, I think. I don't know how many power play goals there were, but statistically the game was fairly close, mostly, although Montreal did dominate the face-off percentage. But the game was close otherwise, and Buffalo actually had a lead in this game, 2-1 early. And then it was really close until really late in the game. There was an empty net in the final couple of minutes. Montreal did have one power play goal to start the game. So that's the way that this game went, man. And I think Buffalo is the right side in this one for all those reasons. I think it's a zigzag spot. I think it's a look-ahead spot for Montreal. I think Buffalo's got the adjustments to make. That first game was closer than it looks, and the line is deceiving. So give me Buffalo in that one. Tampa and Florida, big game, obviously. I mean, this is a big game between these two Florida teams. Both teams have been hot recently coming out of the All-Star break. Tampa's won a ton of games in a row, both before and after the All-Star break. Now they just beat Washington. They beat Edmonton a couple games ago. Really, really playing well. The Vasilevsky, he's going to need a break at some point, right? I mean, this is like kind of inhuman that he's playing this many games in a row without a break. I don't know if he's going to play in this one or if they're going to let him go one more game and then have him rest tomorrow against Columbus. I don't know what the plan is going to be here. So you might get a tired Vasilevsky, though. So Florida might have the more rested goalie here. They probably will play Bobrovsky again, even though they've been putting Knight in there basically every couple of games. So they haven't let Bobrovsky go 3 games in a row that often. But in a spot like this, maybe they will. I don't know, because it's a big game against Tampa. I'd probably lean to Florida in this one, but the odds makers, I mean, the market is looking completely against it. So Florida down from -135 to -120. 64% of tickets on them, 65% of the cash coming in on Tampa Bay. I don't really understand why. I mean, they're having to play 2 really difficult road games in a row. Florida coming off a much easier win and staying at home. So I don't really understand the line moves there. And you're probably going to have either Tampa's going to have to play their backup goalie here, or they're going to have a really tired Vasilevsky in this one. So I don't get it. Whatever, though. Then we have the Rangers playing on a back-to-back. I think they're the only team playing on a back-to-back today. They won yesterday against the Nashville Predators. They shut them out 4-0. The Islanders also just beat the Predators Saturday, because I was on the Islanders in that game. They won in a crazy high-scoring 7-4 win. So both teams coming off that. The Rangers are less rested, obviously, because they're playing in the back-to-back. Might be a spot where maybe you take advantage of that and look to the Islanders. The line seems to be moving that way. Rangers down from -130 to -115. 94% of tickets, 99% of the cash coming in on the Rangers. I don't know. I don't know what I would do in that game, but that's what's going on there, basically. And we have Chicago returning home from a road trip, so I don't want anything to do with Chicago. I don't want to really have anything to do with teams returning home from road trips, even though it wasn't a long road trip duration-wise. They did go out to the Pacific Coast, so I was thinking, they're going to play at LA this time, but they're not. They were just out at like Las Vegas and Anaheim. Now they're coming back home to play LA. Very, very strange. LA is on a slide right now as well, having lost 3 games in a row. So you're probably not going to get an unfocused LA Kings team in that one, having lost that many games in a row, even though normally they might overlook Chicago. Might not be the case in that one. So, I don't love how that sets up for Chicago. Moving over to the NBA, quickly before I get out of here, we got Golden State. I would lean against Golden State here, man. I mean, they were kind of rolling, and then they lost at Philadelphia, which I think was yesterday. So they have no time off. Or no, it was 2 days ago, excuse me. So they have 1 day off. That can break that winning momentum, man. When you have momentum like that, you don't want to lose a game. And I think they overlooked this Embiid-less 76ers team. And now they're coming off that momentum-stopping loss, going to this Charlotte team who nobody's going to pay that much attention to. And then they got the Knicks up tomorrow, which is a much bigger game. So they could overlook Charlotte in the spot, man. And Charlotte, I went against them on Saturday, I believe, and they had a bad loss to Washington. I told you Charlotte was in a bad spot. Charlotte has been playing all these really, really ugly games. So when they play big-name teams, they do step up. And they did just lose to this Golden State team by 36 on the road at Golden State back on the 25th. So it is a little bit of a quick revenge spot for Charlotte, and they're coming off that horrendous loss to Washington. But again, that was a horrible spot for Charlotte, coming off of playing well against Dallas and now returning home. I've had a good gauge on Charlotte these last couple of games, and I played them in the game against Dallas. They covered for me. Then I faded them in this game against Washington, and Washington got the cover for me. So Charlotte, it would be Charlotte or pass for me in this game. You're taking a lot of points with Charlotte if you want it. Warriors up from 11.5 to 12 with juice, 75% of tickets, 87% of the cash. The money looks like it's coming in on the Warriors side. I do not agree with that, obviously. So that is not what I'm doing there. Oh, I think I forgot to look at the market on Buffalo, by the way. Montreal's down from -110 to -106, and we don't see any percentages yet. So my mistake there. Going back to hockey real quick. All right, back to this. Portland and Philadelphia. This is a game where I was potentially looking at the over in this game because both teams are really, really in bad spots. The total's up from 226 to 228.5, so expecting some tired legs, which can sometimes affect the defense more than the offense. Philadelphia's down from 6.5 to 3.5. I don't know if that's like something to do with the personnel or what's going on here because we know Embiid's not playing, but I looked at the injury report and there isn't a whole lot there, although I think Paul George is kind of like game time decision day to day, so we'll see what happens with him. 65% of tickets, 68% of the cash on the Trailblazers. But if I was going to play this game, I would fade the Trailblazers. I mean, I think their spot is worse. Like, if they were not up against a Sixers team that's also in a bad spot here, I would be fading Portland like that. I mean, they just took Cleveland into overtime last night. Now they're coming off of that game with no time off, having to go to Philly, and then they got Boston and Oklahoma City up after this. This spot is terrible for Portland. Major sandwich spot. I mean, you just took Cleveland to OT, and Portland was winning more than half of this game. They were winning well into the second half in this game by, 18-point lead in that game towards the end of the third quarter, and then Cleveland still came back and won and beat them in overtime. Brutal for Portland. I don't know how you get back up off the mat after that. The problem is Philadelphia's coming off a nice win over Golden State, too, after playing New York pretty tough. The Knicks, without Embiid, Philadelphia's starting to play decently at the very least against some pretty good teams. Now they're actually having to play Portland in what is also kind of a sandwich spot as they have Minnesota and then Boston up after this on the road. Minnesota tomorrow. So not a spot, like this is a spot where I would look to fade Philadelphia under normal circumstances. I think Portland is in the worst spot. So I would still lean to Philadelphia on the side in that one, but that is not going to be a game I'm going to touch at all. The game I'm on is I told you it's ugly, man. Washington Wizards +9 is going to be the play. Heat are down from 11 to 8.5 with juice. I don't know if that's just because of injuries or I don't know what the deal is here, but they are public. 62% of tickets, only 58% of the cash. So I think we are seeing public still coming in on the Heat, and we're seeing reverse line movement. No public bettor is going to want Washington, but I think that win, the fact they've won 2 of their last 3, even though they were to bad teams, and they played well in that other game, too, against Portland. Even though it's Brooklyn and Charlotte, still getting those wins will help give you a little bit of confidence going forward, give you a little bit of momentum. So I like that. I like how that sets up for Washington, and I don't like how the spot sets up for Miami, as they just took the Knicks into overtime. Big performance from Miami against one of the better teams in the East. They had beaten Indiana the game before that, too, so they played 2 really difficult games in a row. And you do have to look at how many games these teams have played recently, too, by the way, where I think Portland is playing like I think it's like a 5th game in 8 days or something. So you got to look, because some of these teams have these jammed schedules, too. But Miami's coming off of that, and they got Cleveland and then Minnesota up in a couple of days. So this is a sandwich spot. I think they may overlook Washington. I think Washington will show up in a game against Miami, even though Miami is without Butler now, and Miami's a below 500 team. Washington, I do think they'll show up because it is still the Miami Heat. They're still good in name, and they still have a couple of talented players there as well that have name recognition with Embiid, Adebayo. I don't know if Adebayo's playing, but yeah. And then we got Houston at Oklahoma City, the other big game here. This might be the last one I'll talk about. Oklahoma City's returning home from a road trip, although it wasn't a long road trip. And they just won in a barn burner, but they did it last night against San Antonio. So Oklahoma City is playing in the midst of kind of a packed schedule here. They're, I believe, playing a 5th game in 8 days or something, all in different cities. So that is something you do have to watch out for. But it's not like they're going to not pay attention to Houston. It's just a matter of how tired is OKC going to be after having to put that game away against San Antonio. That was a much closer game for a while there, and they finally were able to put that game away, and they actually wound up covering a game that looked like they had no shot of covering that game. Just crazy. Houston is going to be focused on this game. Houston just lost to Sacramento, so they're coming off a loss. Their schedule has been a bit less tight. They had a few days off prior to that, so Houston does have more rest coming into this one. So I would look to take the points with Houston in this one or not play it, which I'm not playing it. But Thunder down from 11.5 to 10. That's been the live movement there, and I think that's about it, man. That's going to do it for my analysis for today. Thanks for hanging out. Howard is the college basketball play today, plus 9.5. Playing these underdogs, man. NBA, Washington Wizards, plus 9. NHL, Buffalo Sabres, minus 110. All ugliness today. Tower Gang Toad on Twitter and patreon.com/TowerGang to support the most hilarious offensive podcast that has ever existed. Thanks, guys. That's going to do it from me, and peace out. Happy Monday.